Actually, I killed it somewhere.
Good afternoon. This is a meeting of the Transportation Committee. Thank you to Council Members Alarcon and Rosendahl. We do have only five items today, so unfortunately no consent items. So we'll start with number one. Madam Clerk.
Item number one is a Gruel-Smith motion relative to the safety of local mass transit travel and lessons learned from the emergency response to the Metrolink accident.
Great. Please, and you can bring up another chair, Captain. There you go. Thank you all very much. And the intent of this motion that Mr. Smith and I and others introduced was really to begin the dialogue. I had a lot of questions today. Are you going to have the report on what happened? I said no. What we want to do is be able to ask all of you who I think I want to commend each and every one of you for your team's response that day. The city of Los Angeles, on so many levels, responds to a crisis, in this instance, first responders in trying to save lives. But we all know, and as we were talking yesterday about the fact that after every incident, just like the earthquake that happened a month or so ago, there are after-incident reports where you look at what went right, and I think for us to be able to share where the city of Los Angeles was a leader in responding, where we could do better, or where there are other agencies that are not under the city's purview that we would want to ask them, some questions and ways in which the city could support better. So our interest today is really for you to tell us what your steps are in reviewing this, and not necessarily what went right or wrong, although if you have some initial impressions, that would be great as well. And some of the things we heard from anecdotally was, of course, that were the helicopters able to land to the closest hospital? What was the challenge with that in our own departments? Would we change things to individuals whose relatives passed away who felt they didn't have one person, and again, that's not necessarily the city's response, maybe the coroner or some other, where they could go to that would be able to give them all the information, maybe having an entity or an individual assigned to each of those people who were impacted by that. So our idea today is really to give us feedback on how you think you're going to look at the after incident, and any other kind of initial impressions relative to this. We know it is not under our purview as to why it happened. That is under the Metrolink, and they will deal with those issues separately. Really, for the city of Los Angeles, it is what role are we playing in dealing with that kind of crisis. And so, yes, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just as a sidebar, we had a 6.3 earthquake yesterday in the ocean off of one of the South American countries. Fortunately, there was no tsunami. I won't say anything more. My guys understand what I'm talking about on that. Thank you.
And I think Mr. Alarcon, who was there personally, probably has his own impressions as well. But I think, again, we should, after every incident that occurs, review, and that's I know part of your standard operating procedure. And so with that, I think Arif wants to start. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Gruel. Good afternoon, Council members. I'm Arif Alicon. I'm the Deputy Mayor of the Office of Homeland Security and Public Safety in Mayor Villaraigosa's office. Thank you for inviting us here today to speak about the tragedy from last week. I think the Mayor said it well when he said that the tragedy was an incredible event in the community, but the pride in which he felt, and I think all of us felt, to see the tremendous response, coordination, and organization of not only the first responders, being the fire department, police department, and other agencies, but also the second responders who came to support those agencies, as well as both the county and federal partners that we have to deal with this. Although 25 lives were lost, it could have been much, much more. And it really is to the credit of all the responding agencies who saved so many lives and did a tremendous job in transporting over 40 victims by helicopter, as well as approximately 70 victims by transport. I think one thing that's important to note is that the response that you saw and that the community saw was no accident in of itself. It was the result of tremendous planning and preparation by all the agencies involved. In fact, one of the scenarios that's used in some of the training programs, from what I understand, Jim Featherstone can speak to it in more detail, is actually a train crash in the Santa Susana Pass. Also, the lessons that were learned from the Glendale Metrolink accident were put into effect, and I think that is a tremendous point that should be made about how these departments are continually evaluating their response and making sure that they improve upon for the next response. And that's what's already begun. It began really on the day of the incident, the day after the incident. The after-action review is a process. It is not simply a meeting, getting together, writing up a report, and putting it on a shelf. And from the Mayor's Office perspective, we've been very pleased with the reviews that have been going on in each of the departments, as well as a citywide after-action review meeting this morning that lasted almost 3 hours. And many follow-ups that we're going to do, and we're going to continue to evaluate this to make sure that the next response is even better. And also making sure that we're not just preparing for the last accident that we've encountered, but that it's also flexible and anticipating other types of disasters that could occur in the future. Thank you.
Great. I think probably what we'll do is just ask each of the individuals at the table to make a few remarks.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Groove and other members of the committee. I essentially would echo a lot of things that Deputy Mayor Ali Khan has said. This morning was the first step in the formal after-action review process. Let me back up real quickly. In 2006, then EPD, now EMD, took over the responsibility for after-action review of significant incidents and training for the city. The significant incident, the training is the whole formula-based issue that the federal government dictates. But what we've also decided to do, previously we did after-action reviews based on EOC activation. What we do now is we do an after-action review for any significant incident that affects public safety or involves multiple jurisdiction and departmental or discipline participation. So this morning was essentially what we call a hot wash. The hot wash is where the participants come in and they talk about things that they would sustain and things that they would improve, and then they give an overall synopsis of how they saw the incident. We had over 75 people in the hot wash this morning. As the Deputy Mayor says, it lasted almost 3 hours.
You said 75 people?
Yes, ma'am. So, and we had a very strict format. It's a bare bones. It's all meat, no fat in this after-action review process, and that will become the genesis for the after-action review document. There'll be a formal questionnaire that goes out, and we'll turn it into another city volume. But what we have is this morning we have probably one of the most honest exchanges post incident that we've seen a long time in the city. I think that's a testament to the confidence and the trust that the operating agencies and departments in the city have with each other in terms of, this is what we didn't do well, this is what we did well. So there's a good sharing there. What we saw that Friday and into Saturday was a great demonstration of unified command and unified operations, whether it was the unified command agencies in particular or the assisting and support agencies, as well as the support from the community. The support from such entities as CERT and neighborhood councils was tremendous. And that went well through the recovery process. One of the things we want to look at very strongly in our after-action review process is the recovery process, because for more than a week now, I know my department in particular has been working to assist Metrolink in what we would call the recovery process, whether it was victim assistance or family assistance, and victims not necessarily being people who were on the train, but the school where the staging area was and the incident command post. They were victimized to an extent by the operation, just in that immediate infrastructure that was put upon them. So there are things in terms of getting them back up and getting them back into a continuity of operations mode. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at how can we better interface with private entities in terms of crisis management? Do the entities that we work with, do they have a crisis management plan or process in place? And if so, how does the city dovetail with that process?
And just on the meeting you all had this morning, was that all just internal city, or was it just internal?
City and county.
City and county? Okay, both of those. Okay. Chief Veda.
Good afternoon. Just before I begin my comments, the real heroes here were the folks on the ground, just the police and fire. They just demonstrated a tremendous amount of professionalism, and also the allied responders that came to our aid at a very difficult time. We did take some lessons
Your
learned
name for
from
the record, please.
Pardon me?
Your name for the record.
Mario Rueda. I'm a deputy chief with Los Angeles Fire Department. I was the incident commander that day. We did take some lessons learned from the Glendale train incident, as was discussed. We transported one patient via air ambulance from the Glendale train accident. We inundated the two local Glendale hospitals with numerous patients. In this event, we transported nearly 40 of the most critical patients via air, and they were distributed to 8 of our trauma centers, which are set up with surgical teams and were prepared for those critical patients. And I can tell you, some of those patients would not have made it via ground transport that day. A great improvement from previous incidents, and that was one of the recommendations that, 2 of the recommendations that came from the Glendale after action were air ambulance use and distribution of patients, which were both greatly improved. Also, we have a tremendous amount of experience in the fire department with transporting victims of traffic accidents, other accidents, and children via air from the San Fernando Valley, which served well. These folks were already thinking about it and acted quickly to get our helicopters in the air and mutual aid. We previously at our dispatch center did not have an assignment type for a derailment. In this case, our dispatch center alertly dispatched for derailment, which brought a whole host of resources on that immediate response. Since the Glendale train accident, we have been working close with Department of Health Services Medical Alert Center, which actually acts as our clearinghouse for patients. And in this case, sending one of our EMS captains was critical to that effort at the Medical Alert Center, and also the drills that we've conducted really facilitated the movement of patients in a rapid fashion. Also, I didn't mention it this morning, I'll mention it here. One of the things we've been working with the UASI grants and other grants has been to build capability. And in this case, the building of capability in terms of our urban search and rescue, some of our multi-casualty caches that we've purchased, things that we've purchased for the, for the act that nobody wants to see, which is a man-made act, actually served us well in this capacity. We had both of those assets out there. I think areas of improvement that were brought up this morning, clearly for us, I wasn't pleased with our patient tracking. Well, a very difficult circumstances, firefighters and police officers were dealing with really horrific injuries, more than I've seen in my 29 years. Such a violent accident where clothing was actually ripped off, people dismembered. There was just very violent accident. Our initial responsibility is to make sure they live. And in this instance, some of the patient information probably wasn't as accurate as it could have been, and that's something we're going to have to work on within our system. But the first job of firefighters was to get those folks loaded onto aircraft and get them to hospitals. But that is an area I think we can work on. Also has been mentioned at the Family Assistance Center, just that accuracy of information, trying to make it more timely is something we can certainly work on. I don't know that it'll ever be realistic. We can give names and destinations in a short period of time, but I think at least numbers and where those patients actually were transported to is probably realistic for us to try to reconcile. And those will be some areas that we'll certainly work on. We'll certainly cooperate with emergency management in the city after action. Department of Health Services is also holding a after action that we will participate in. I know Chief Moore and I will be preparing a unified critique with police and fire just to make sure that our training and our protocols are consistent. And we will conduct a internal after action so that we can really narrow down the task level issues and make sure those are fixed.
Madam Chair, just one question. The communication systems, was everybody on the same wavelength with the frequencies and like that, and they were able to communicate easily?
Not yet.
Not yet.
And it does present some difficulties that we bridge through unified command, co-location, trying to separate out assignments, but and we can patch, in some cases, radio frequencies. In this case, because we are in such a tight arena, the communication between responding agencies became less of an issue. In other circumstances where an event is spread out or multiple locations, that would present quite a bit different challenge for us.
And, we had just met a few days before the Urban Search and Rescue with the team out there and talking about greater resources for that group, where they're located out there in the San Fernando Valley, and a small cadre that then pull from other areas. But I did have a chance to talk to the mayor a couple days later after that and said we really needed to review particularly the kinds of resources for urban search and rescue, because I think they were probably a key component with the rest of the firefighters that you had out there in those locations. Were they one of the immediate responders as well in those areas?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Fire Station 88 is one of our urban search and rescue task forces, and I think they were the second unit on the scene and were involved for several hours in that rescue.
Yeah. I was sharing with him that that they're in trailers since I'd been there and kind of been in trailers for a long time, that we should look at. I made my own personal plug for trying to help in that location, because in this kind of incident, them having as many resources as possible and trained individuals would really be of assistance. You mentioned, then we'll go to Chief Moore, and this is where I did hear from people and someone, unfortunately, who had passed away. Their husband passed away, and it was the second to the last person identified, I think, Saturday night at 9 o'clock. And their, more challenge for them was that they heard from one individual where there's a John Doe at UCLA, and so they ran to UCLA, then they ran to the next hospital because there, again, difficulty in identifying who these individuals were. But I would be interested, as you look at the after incident, if there's been examples of where there's one, if I'm the, the Gruhl family and I have someone on that train that, you are my point of contact, so to speak, not you at your current level, but you as an individual are the one that says, okay, here's what we know. We won't send you out to each of these hospitals, but we're going to check with each of the hospitals and see what kinds of things we are able to do, because I think they were frantic in going from location to location without knowing. And again, it was, in some ways when you watched it on TV, and again, Mr. Alcon was there, you saw that they were doing their job in a very efficient manner. It did not look chaotic. It looked like they were doing what they needed to do, and so we appreciate that.
And it is just very difficult in those treatment areas, particularly in the critical area. The firefighters quite often, to make sure they're doing a full assessment, will cut the clothing off, which leaves the jeans and the wallet, and that's really secondary to try to get that individual, make sure they get through this first golden hour and get to a hospital.
I think something else, someone said people also who weren't, hurt dramatically, left, and trying to educate the public as well. Of course, you want to be able to go to your family or whatever, but we really do need, you have to tell somebody and be able to do that and not to leave, even though that might be your original instinct. So I think educating the public about the response, if you're involved in something like this, would be another part of our efforts.
Right.
So, Chief Moore, did you want to ask? Yes, sure.
A couple
Chief.
of questions. This was a horrendous accident by any stretch of the imagination. It was probably equivalent to 100 serious accidents, and the resources were stretched beyond imagination. And but it seemed to me that the triage operation was. It was not clear to clearly the volunteers who hadn't been previously trained could not identify things, but there didn't appear to be an MD present, even after 2 hours. How could you describe, in this particular incident, how the triage operation developed in terms of who was qualified to assess and move the victims from one triage point to another? To me, it seemed as if it could have been enhanced had there been an MD present, an emergency professional present, and I know that they were scrambling to get to the hospitals. Do we have a system in place for major incidents where we can call upon a professional triage expert to come? Now, I know the fire department had, actually I saw the sheriff's department with supervisory medical personnel and the fire department, of course. I don't know that there were any MDs present. So if you could describe how the triage emerged in this situation.
Yeah, as part of our protocol, we do not have an MD that is specifically assigned. However, in this case, we were very fortunate. If you looked at even the photos, part of our triaging system has a series of colors that even the untrained transporters, our police officers figured red looked to be most critical, yellow's the moderate, and green is actually our minor. And the patients were distributed among the triage areas that way. Ordinarily, a paramedic will be assigned, a paramedic captain. Our EMS captains are assigned to each of those care holding areas and would be the person making the final decision on the critical nature of a patient. In this case, our medical director, Dr. Mark Eckstein, arrived on scene about the same time I did. Mark was assigned to our triage area, and I can tell you he personally assessed 2 patients that didn't appear to be as critical. One was abdomen pain and another woman with a fractured femur, which had been triaged to a lesser degree. His personal assessment moved them up to the front because he felt they were in jeopardy of passing away in the treatment area. So in this case, we are actually very fortunate, and Mark does respond on a lot of calls. He is a member of the Los Angeles Fire Department, and he, in this case, he was on the scene and did make those calls. Ordinarily, in an event like this, our main role is to try to get those folks to hospitals. In this case, they're not necessarily medical problems; these are trauma victims, and they're really the only thing really that's going to save the most serious patients is rapid transport to the hospital. But Mark Eckstein was instrumental in making sure that that protocol was in place and being followed.
The other question I have is actually for anybody who can answer it. This location has had a history of concern raised by the community that dates back 20, 30 years. And the community responded. They almost instinctively knew what to do. Many neighbors came out and just helped out. And I'm wondering if there are other areas of the city of Los Angeles where we have the same concerns that are being raised by residents, that we might assess and do a better job of educating the residents as to how they might be most helpful, what kinds of equipment they might keep in their garage, what kinds of coordinated response they might have, what would happen if an event did happen. Do we have any other sites? I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I know that this one has been a concern. Even when I used to hike up there 30 years ago, I remember going to that immediate location and saying, I don't understand why 2 trains going in opposite directions never crash here. And so it was, it wasn't a surprise to me when I saw where it was, but I'm wondering if there are other sites where we might train the local community who might be willing to respond.
Council member, we do have certain areas in the city where we have specific mitigation plans. The tsunami areas, for example, when we have an identifiable hazard of significant risk, and we do make an effort to educate and make aware the community as much as possible. Can we do a better job? Absolutely. For instance, as the deputy mayor mentioned in the beginning, a 2-day unified command training that we sent probably most of the ranking officers at the Metrolink incident have been through this training up in Oxnard, where day one's capstone exercise is a train crash in the Santa Susana Pass.
You know, I think the answer, though, for all areas of the city, which we push hard, is both our CERT training, which we do have a lot of folks, and does give you a better understanding of what you might do and how you might be involved and how to volunteer and actually help your own family if they're impacted. And then we do have a disaster awareness course that's much shorter for those individuals that really can't commit to the long course. And both of those are advertised, and those would really be the direction I'd recommend folks to follow.
One of the things that we've really ramped up in the last year and a half is our ambassador program, where each neighborhood council, we have an identifiable person who essentially becomes the disaster ambassador, as a person that works with EMD, police and fire. So we have somebody organic to that neighborhood council to who's our direct contact relative to specific hazards in that neighborhood. So that's part of our outreach effort, and it's ongoing.
And it was evident.
I'm sorry, sir?
It was evident.
Oh, the response, I got to the site around midnight, and some of the staging areas that the community had set up, I thought I was at a campaign incident that the police and fire had set up. I mean, the effort by that community was awesome.
I think the importance, too, of CERT training, which allows you to respond to almost anything. My staff actually just yesterday did, all of them had a little bit of an abbreviated CERT training. Some of them had the other ones, but I think the importance, we saw the CERT people who went out there and the neighborhood councils, it really speaks volumes of why we've been trying to keep that program going, because it is vitally improvement. Chief Moore.
Good afternoon. Deputy Chief Michael Moore with LAPD, and Councilwoman Gruhl, Councilman Rosenthal, and Councilman Alarcon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. I share with the others that have spoken before me as to the pride that LAPD has in the men and women that responded and worked in such close partnership with LA Fire and other members of the city family, as well as the Sheriff's Department, Coroner's Office, and Mental Health, and just countless agencies that came, all being supported in the immediate moments by the community that sprang to action, and in the ensuing hours, in their interest and concern and support. I will tell you that it was encouraging to our men and women as they stood out there and took action to have as much support as the Chatsworth community showed and continues to show. Our reaction to this, as far as, in just real quick brief, what worked was interagency operability. It's a technical term as far as communication, but in my view, and I think in the view of everyone I've heard so far about this, we saw it in action. From the initial moments through the ensuing days, the agencies put away their jurisdictions and put on their hats and their heads, and they pointed them towards the problem and figured who was in the best position to respond and to work towards common objectives and use effective strategies. So not only the first responders, but the unsung heroes are the allied agencies and those other city departments and other entities and resources that came to bear to support us as first responders. It allowed us, such as the Department of Transportation, allowed us to free those first responders of uniform officers and move them to other important posts while the perimeter was maintained. This location, its topography, its rural area here in the middle of Los Angeles was truly evident, and these city resources played an important role in allowing the department to continue in its preparedness for other instances across the city and respond to other emergencies in the ensuing days. The other thing I'd like to point out is that the investment paid off, and what I mean by that is the investment, we've talked about UASI monies, we've talked about the tens of thousands of hours of training, the purchase of equipment, all of it many times referenced in regards to a man-made event. This was a man-made event. It was an accident. It wasn't a terrorist act, but the equipment was an all-hazards approach. It applied equally in this circumstance as it did in a terrorist act, and it would not have been there but for the planning and the investment that the city and elected officials, such as the council councilman before us, as well as the mayor and all of city government, have really pinned its ears back and pointed towards this city being prepared and being able to not only respond but to recover. So I congratulate all of the city's response on that, because it really proved its worth on that immediate event, the hours of it. I was there within 10 to 15 minutes of the event, and to have helicopter airships already moving and evacuating in an organized manner was truly extraordinary. And to see the organized chaos is a good term for it, that happened in the hours following the initial crash, is both a product of familiarization with each other, working cooperatively, but the training, but also the equipment. As to attention, that continued investment of training, equipment, and planning needs to be amplified. This is something we really we never stop, and I hear no one suggesting it, but I think it's something that needs to be said, is that we need to replenish our stocks, and as we go through the ensuing process of understanding what worked well, also understand what areas we need to improve upon. That area that is probably most pressing for the department, and it was said this morning, it was shared by other agencies, is our ability to deal with mass casualties. This was an event that was unscripted as to a trainload of passengers that were with no manifest, not really understanding how many people were on there. Horrendous crash with 100-plus casualties, certain dead, and really trying to then figure out who they were, where they were, who was involved, as who unfortunately had lost their life, who were critically injured, and who were walking wounded, or who had frankly had been able to walk away without a scratch. To be able to identify that group and reunite them in any manner or form with concerned family members and so forth. While it took hours, I'm sure to families it seemed like it took days. And to that, the department joins with the rest of the city family and county allied agencies to our commitment that we need to work on that. We need to work on it and try to eliminate as much of that anguish. But we also must recognize that in those few hours after such an event, the primary focus is, as Chief Rueda indicated, is to save their life. And to that end, I congratulate fire, their personnel that operated the mechanism of the triage, the removal, and as well as our hospital staff and the healthcare system that absorbed this punch and responded as well as they did. I am very proud to say that this is a concern that is worth having for some of the more tragic matters that could have befell us. And I'll answer any questions you might have. Oh, I'm sorry, one last point. Steps to review. We began reviewing that night emotionally with our first responders, with psychologists, and our clergy, both for the first responders as to their welfare and health, and those debriefs are continuing today, more those sessions tomorrow. This is a particular strong calamity in the sense of our people. Not only did we lose an officer, but also, as Chief Rueda indicated, the enormity of this crash, the sites, the duration of it, those are all matters that took a significant toll. The department is mindful of it, and we have mustered our behavioral science sections personnel, and they are definitely working towards restoring our people's sense of control and balance. And I'm happy to say that our people are responding well to that support, and I look forward to that being a success. Operationally, we are debriefing this. Yesterday, the department held a debrief in the Valley with its initial managers that responded for more than 3 hours. Today, we attended a citywide debrief. There will be a formal after-action report that's presently being assembled that will talk about what resources were brought to bear, the chronology of the events, the steps and strategies taken, and a critique as to lessons learned in areas that need improvement or further attention. That'll be coordinated with this department, with the fire department, as well as via the mayor's office to emergency management, so that the city will have at the end of the day, we'll have a soup to nuts understanding of what happened out that day as to the city's response, how well we were prepared, and what areas we need to continue to work on for further enhancements.
Thank you. Sean. And Sean, really yours is twofold. Of one, the response of DOT, but the other part of the motion was really looking at the safety of our public transit and the role that the city plays in that, and to reassure the public as to what we're doing to ensure the safety of those that we're responsible for as well.
Yes, good afternoon, council members. Sean Skean for the Department of Transportation. To start on the part about the emergency response, I can report that DOT participated in the support of the rescue by directing traffic around the closure, managing traffic on the surrounding streets, and coordinating with Caltrans because a portion of Topanga Canyon was closed, and that's a state route. We had 56 traffic officers deployed, 8 engineers, and our ADSAC center was staffed to manage the traffic in the area. And I just heard good reports from police that we did a good job and were able to relieve them of those duties. So that was our role. We did have someone at the Unified Command Post as well. Regarding the transit safety, as a result of this incident and this motion, we're in discussions with Metro, that's the MTA, Metrolink, the CPUC, FRA, and others regarding transit and rail safety in the Los Angeles region, and we will report back at a future date on transit and rail safety in this area. I do want to add that the LA DOT has an aggressive rail crossing safety program where we look at all the railroad crossings in the city and implement safety programs to enhance them for both rail, transit, and for freight rail, and we work in cooperation with those agencies that either run the trains or have other jurisdictions like the PUC at the crossings. We're very forward-looking in our efforts to improve rail crossing safety. That's one of the areas in rail that we do have jurisdiction at the rail crossings, and we do have a section in the department that's responsible for that, and we go after funding and implement programs citywide.
Yeah. Okay. And when you've listed all the entities that actually provide transit in the city of Los Angeles, so you'll include anyone who has some kind of transit?
Yes.
in that review?
When I said Metro, it also include Dash Commuter Service and the other municipal
Commuter Express
operators.
in there. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know you'll be reporting back. We have a Measure R on the ballot, and if the voters approve it, we'll have monies to actually build the mass transit system we need in our region, at least in LA County. My biggest concern going forward is what Mr. Alarcon said, that there was the anecdotal story in that neighborhood about that one single track tunnel, and my God, someday there'll be an issue. My concern right now is building all of our high-speed rails. I don't care if it's the subway to the, not the subway to the sea, but the Expo line, which is presently under construction, and some of these others at grade versus above grade or below grade. We want to make them efficient. We want to make them safe. There is tremendous concern with me that at grade, it just begs the issue of a disaster. It can be a simple one of one person or one car or a truck and a light rail, or it could be something even more significant than that. I think we need to refocus when we look at the billions we're going to spend into mass transit, especially the above-ground mass transit, not the subway as much, because that obviously isn't as issue for me. But we need to reconsider. And I don't ever want to hear anybody say it's cheaper to do it at grade. That's why we're doing it. I don't want to hear that again. I would rather spend the money and do it right than not do it at all, especially if it can mean fatalities and at-grade issues. So when you do that analysis, take a deep breath at it, because I know what we've done in the past. Well, it's cheaper and we can get it done quicker. We, at least with Culver City, from my end, where I have some influence, which is going to be phase 2 to Santa Monica, they agreed it should be above grade and it might cost $30 million more. I don't care about the price. I care about the safety of the people, and therefore that's one big issue. Second thing I want to say, everybody, great. The cooperation, coordination was unheralded, and it was just fantastic. It was an awful situation, and I also appreciate Boxer and Feinstein, our two great senators, pushing forward in Washington to get us the support opportunity where this never should have happened in the first place. They should have put those safety mechanisms in place like they did in the East Coast. The West Coast didn't do it. I don't know who's responsible. Cost more. There's no way we can spend enough money to bring back those 25 people or 26 that were killed. No way. And I don't know when the history of that issues came up and down, and they decided no and whatever. So I'm not going to throw any blame. All I can deal with is today and tomorrow. Whatever the latest technology is for safety must be incorporated in every project we ever do, and the cost should not be the issue. It should be the safety. That's the issue. That's all. Thank you.
First of all, I want to clarify for people always talk about the Metrolink system, but Metrolink is a system within a system, and it's actually the Southern California Regional Rail Authority that controls the Metrolink. And the reason I say that is because they also control the non-Metrolink access to rail. And so it's not as if Metrolink imposed itself in this rail system. It's part of an overriding system that is under the control of the Southern California Regional Rail Authority. It's not Metrolink, it's the Southern California Regional Rail Authority. And so the discussion about use in opposite direction of the same rail is something that's quite common within that system. And the coordination is clearly their responsibility. We all know that there'll probably be the emergence of some good news with regard to safety equipment that will probably be required and hopefully be funded for by the federal government to some extent. And so the silver lining in the cloud is that that hopefully these kinds of accidents will not occur. An interesting point, when you talked about at grade, Mr. Rosendahl, the thought that I was having was, having arrived about 15 minutes after the accident, if it were not at grade, more people probably would have perished. So there were a lot of things that were simply fortuity. It was fortunate that the accident didn't occur 300 feet to the west. Otherwise, probably everybody would have perished in the tunnel. It was fortunate that the staging area,
Right there.
not only was it right there, it had a walkway that was directly at the point of about 50 feet from the point of impact, and directly at the last car. That was simply fortunate. The residents and their knowledge of that particular site and their quick response was very fortunate. The people on the train actually who survived were extremely fortunate. There was a sense of calm in the midst of the tumult, and I have to say that the only thing I can suggest was not only was it trauma, was the fact that there was the stress of the incident itself, but I also believe it had to do with the abundance of help, that people were, the outreaching of help, and many of the victims, I think, felt calm, and several expressed, please, I'm fine, go help somebody else, and so I think that's a tribute to our response system. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't in any way diminish the incredible loss and the horrendous nature of this particular accident, and we should never lose sight of that. That should be the primary observation that anybody walks away with. I do have to say it wasn't a ballet. I've heard people talk about it being a ballet. It wasn't a ballet. A ballet is choreographed every step. People did what they had to do. They didn't know what they were going to do next. They just did it. And it could have been, police personnel, fire personnel. They didn't necessarily know what they were going to do. There were certain individuals who knew what they had to do. But for the most part, the hundreds and hundreds of people who responded just did what was needed to do in that particular moment, whether it was pick up a stretcher, roll the body onto a stretcher, move blankets, provide water, whatever they had to do, they were doing. But it wasn't choreographed. People did what they had to do, and that's the nature of emergency response. There are certain elements that are choreographed, but you can't choreograph something like this. So the one thing I have to tell you, I have been involved in emergency operations since the Whittier Narrows earthquake when I was the emergency operations coordinator for the personnel department. And in fact, on the day of the Whittier Narrows earthquake, we were supposed to have a training in Lake Arrowhead with all the major players. And we canceled it, obviously. We had other things to do. We had a real live training experience. But I never would have imagined the way the coordination took place. You couldn't, outside of the uniforms, outside of the civilian clothes, outside of what people were wearing, you couldn't tell the difference between who was doing what. They were all helping. And I want to repeat that it wasn't just LAPD and LA Fire. I saw many highway patrol officers. I saw many, I remember being surprised to see probation officers there, and numerous Metrolink personnel, school district police, just about every agency you could imagine was there, and they were all helping, and it was clear that they were trained. So while you can't predict these kinds of human acts, whether they were intentional or whether they were accidental, but to know that LA has that many agencies, that many people in the public who are ready to respond in such an aggressive way, and even sometimes in harm's way, is a very calming reality. And so, for my little part, I just want to say thank you to all the personnel. The reports are yet to be had. I hope we do learn some things. I hope we do move forward as a community with advancements that prevent lives in the future. But I think given the circumstances, I think we did the best that we could absolutely do, and I commend all of you and your teams for their work. I also want to point out, I absolutely believe the mayor's volunteer response team did a tremendous job. They were a tremendous contribution, and as a result, my entire staff will go through the CERT training and be part of that team as well, and hopefully we'll coordinate with our neighborhood councils so that we will be certified and trained together, so when a big disaster comes, like an earthquake or something, all of us can respond and know what the other people are doing without even having to see them. But again, I want to say thank you to all of you. I thought you did an outstanding job, and I think the record will reflect that as time goes on. Thank you.
Councilmember, if I could just add
Yes.
one thing that you pointed out. The response from the community was outstanding. The amount of food and water that was brought to the scene to help the responders was, in addition to lumber and other materials that were needed, was tremendous. And especially the support we received from the American Red Cross, both at the Family Reunification Center and at the scene. I think one thing that we've learned, though, is that the city needs to have a better way to integrate that community response. We do have excellent programs like CERT, our community, our crisis response team to help with the victims, but when you have this massive outpouring of support and integrating that into making sure those services are taken advantage of, I think is something that is a lesson learned from this. It worked out well this time, but especially in a much larger capacity situation, it could be more problematic. So that's something we're looking on. And just one last thing I just want to mention. It's been mentioned about the grants that are used and some of the things we've received through that. We're fortunate to have received a substantial amount of money, and I think a lot of times the city is sort of rated on how much money we get. I've always, though, tried to emphasize it matters what we spend that money on. And I think, as was alluded to earlier, the urban search and rescue equipment and training, the hazmat equipment that we received, the preparedness and training we've done with that grant money truly paid off last week, and that's something that we're always trying to improve. And with respect to communications interoperability, fortunately that wasn't an issue during this incident, but we are very cognizant of the fact that it could be a major problem. I work with the Police, Fire, and Emergency Management Division. I have 3 radios because they can't talk to each other. And that's something that the LA RICS project that we're working to collaboratively with the county, and its importance cannot be emphasized enough, because being able to talk to each other could be a very critical issue.
Life and death in that way, so. Well, again, I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here, and this really was to get some initial impressions and then to say, go do your job like you normally do and come back and where we can be helpful from a legislative perspective. And I do want to mention the mayor was there, I know, for a minute it practically happened, to all night, and being there really helping and directing that, and that shows leadership in that way. So I please let him know. I've told him personally, but I think publicly to let him know as well. With that, we do have 4 public speaker cards. So before you all leave, we do have, if there's any specific issues, if I could ask the 4 people to come. Actually, there's 5 of them, so go ahead and leave all 5 seats up there. Clint Simmons, Jay Handel, Damian Goodman, Colleen Mason Heller, and Arnold Sachs. If you could all please take a seat.
Madam Chair, the disposition for this item was to approve, or?
Oh, let's ask them to approve the motion. I'm going to ask
Okay.
them DOT to report back in 45 days. I think indicated emergency preparedness said it'll be about 90 days at least.
I'm going to say I'm going to leave. Unfortunately, I have to leave. We had an incident in my district yesterday. Somebody was killed, and I'm in the middle of dealing with that situation, and so I have to go back to the district. I did want to be here, obviously, for the bicycle issues and all these other issues that are of importance to me, but that takes priority over what I'm doing here. So, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Simmons, followed by Jay Handel.
My name is Clint Simmons. I'm representing the West Dedham Neighborhood Council. We are part of a joint committee of other neighborhood councils in the area, specifically those who within the area of the proposed Expo rail line that is going through. We have a major concern about safety problems, specifically since there have been many school kids who live in and around that track, and they would be affected by this train as it comes through at grade as it is proposed. We have lost a lot of our students on the Blue Line, as we all know. It is one of the worst lines in the country in terms of safety, and so the same type of design is presently being built into the Expo line. I'd like to refer to Article 2 that was called part of the Master Cooperative Agreement by the City of Los Angeles and the Metropolitan Transit Association, which it specifically states that the authority is responsible for coordinating all designs of the Expo Metro line with the City Council office, neighborhood councils, and community groups that are affected by the project. And we would like to know why we are not being brought in to talk with the MTA people, specifically when we have some concerns along the proposed Expo line. And this is part of the master agreement that was signed by the City of Los Angeles with the Expo line in June 23, 2006. And that's one of the things that we like to get anticipated here. We have, if the line is going to be built as it is, there's nothing wrong with making it safe. If it means going underground, you can only build 2 or 3 miles, then you build to that point until you get more money to go the rest of the way, instead of trying to build it cheap and safe, as Mr. Rosenthal just said here today. When you do that, you make mistakes and put a lot of people's lives in danger, specifically our young kids. If you go out and take a look at the track, see how close it passes within 2 of the schools along there. It is dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know we do have MTA represented here as well, and the Expo Line Authority, which is also one of those. And I know the council members that represent the Expo Line area are concerned as well. And I've received a lot of info about making sure those crossings are safe and looking above grade. Thank you for being here.
All right.
Appreciate
Thank you for giving me a chance to speak.
Mr. Handel?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Jay Handel, and I'm here as the chair of the West LA Neighborhood Council. First, to let you know that we have passed a motion in our district where the Expo will be coming through for every one of our major intersections to be above grade or below grade, but not at grade. There must be grade separation. And we say this again as we read the LA Times today of another fatality on a light rail line just today. We are very thankful for our first responders and the great job they do. Unfortunately, they have to keep doing it. And I think it continues to show the definition of insanity, that if we're going to continue to build at grade, we're going to continue to have deaths. And I guess the question comes down to, like when we're asking DOT to put in a traffic light at a bad intersection, how many deaths does it take to get the job done right? While we all understand that we must have mass transit because right now it's a mess, we also understand that doing it wrong is going to cause many, many more lives to be at least endangered and if not lost. So we at the neighborhood council level, and of course at our Chamber of Commerce level as well for the West LA, looking at the traffic impacts that at-grade is going to have in our already completely gridlocked district, ask you, the T Committee, to get to the full council and to put through a motion and be as resilient as Alan Corlin and Carol Gross and everybody else was down in Culver City about the at-grade versus elevated station. Be just as adamant that you cannot build that light rail, at least through my district, from the 405 to the Santa Monica border, at grade, because it's dangerous, it's wrong, and everybody who doesn't fight for grade separation should be held responsible for every death, every fatality in that area. Thank you.
Damian Goodman.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Damian Goodman, and I've been working with Clint and Colleen and many others in my community. I wear many hats. One of them is the co-chair of the Empowerment Congress West Neighborhood Development Council. We've passed resolutions, as have the other South LA neighborhood councils directly impacted by the Expo line. And in our community, there are a variety of opinions, but there is universal concern about the safety of the rail line and the at-grade crossings. One thing which you all should know is I've been plugging the stats on MetroLink, and I know the stats about the blue line. MetroLink from 1993 to the end of 2007 had killed 101 people. Two of those deaths would have been prevented with positive train control systems. The rest would not have, and it's because it's an at-grade, primarily an at-grade system. Now, commuter rail and light rail are very different, but the rate of fatalities in this area compared to the others in the nation is by 3, 4, 5-fold greater. It's the same with the blue line, 90 deaths. The second deadliest system barely approaches 30. There's a problem in this region, and it needs to be taken care of. I've been working on the rail safety issue, and I've been communicating with many individuals. One of them is Professor Najdin Mishkati, who needs to come before this committee, who deserves the same time that you allow these other agencies to explain the work he's been doing at USC for the last 5 and 6 years on commuter rail and light rail safety. Russ Quimby spent 22 years at the National Transportation Safety Board. If he were still there, he would very likely be the investigator in charge of the Chatsworth accident. He's gone to these crossings, specifically the two most contested ones at Dorsey and Western, which is at Fauché, and just been flabbergasted. He's reviewed the grade crossing policy, which determines which streets are elevated or underground and which one is at street level, and he basically says this is an excuse to build trains at street level. It's an excuse to ignore safety concerns and hazards. So I'm going to ask that these documents, which I'll submit to you, that show the fatality rates, be entered into the record, and I'll make sure that you each have copies and that they're sent to your staff members for those that I know. But if you're going to be serious, please, and about recommendations, please involve these experts and begin listening to the neighborhood council has been taking this issue seriously for some time now.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Colleen?
My name is Colleen Mason Heller, and I'm with Neighbors for Smart Rail. We're a coalition of communities and individuals committed to smart, safe transit solutions for Los Angeles. We like to think that we were all about safety before safety was cool. It is sad and cynical that our regional transit agency's shock doctrine tells us over and again that we need mass transit solutions so badly that safety continually takes a back seat to the expediency of on time and under budget. As a result, Los Angeles has the deadliest commuter and light rail systems in the country. Metrolink CEO David Solo has said every grade crossing is an accident waiting to happen. We agree with him, and you should too. In the wake of the Chatsworth train accident, Mayor Villaraigosa has appointed Richard Katz to the Metrolink board, and though agency self-examination is due in light of this tragedy, executive recycling is no real solution. What is needed is not an executive shift, but a transit paradigm shift. Improved train warning devices and positive train controls seem to be a no-brainer, but more technology will never equal the safety of grade-separated crossings. At 9:18 this morning, another pedestrian was struck and killed by a Metrolink train on an at-grade crossing in Sylmar. Neighbors for Smart Rail ask that the City Council of Los Angeles commit to the safety of grade separations like the City of Culver City has already done. I'm also going to read for the West Side Neighborhood Council, on behalf of Terry Tippett, the chair, the following resolution passed on August 14th, 2008. Resolved, the West Side Neighborhood Council opposes any implementation of the Expo 2 Phase 2 light rail line that does not require and guarantee grade separation at Overland, Westwood, Military, and Sepulveda. We also oppose any implementation of the Expo Phase 2 light rail line that does not require and guarantee thorough mitigations for sound, vibration, privacy, and security for residences and businesses close to the line, its stations, and related facilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sachs.
Yes, good afternoon, Arnold Sachs. Couple of things. This is a news article from California Rail News, and this is regarding the San Diego County, North County Transit District, what is it called? They have a rail line, 22-mile rail line, the Sprinter, North, and part of it goes on to say that they share tracks with Santa Fe Railway, but their option, and wondering if this could be recommended, is that their commuter lines run during the day, and the freight rail lines run at night when there's no commuter lines running. So I was wondering if that could be an option that could be looked at on shared tracks. Also, sending a recommendation there was a lot of discussion, a lot of written about how the configuration of the cars themselves tended to add to the injuries that people suffered with the tables in the Metrolink cars becoming missiles, no seat belts. Is it something that could be recommended by the transit department or the city council or somebody to pass on to Metrolink or to MTA that these modes of transportation need to require seat belts or the reconfiguration of the cars? And also, one other thing, in reading the stories regarding the rescue work, there seemed to be some difficulties with the high tension steel, that the equipment was not suitable enough or up to the task necessary, because the high tension steel used for the locomotive or the train cars, they had some problems with that, and that would be looked into. Other than that, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you for your materials.
Oh, excuse me, one other thing. East Side Extension has at-grade crossings, and nobody's looked into that either.
Thank you. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Item number 2 is the CAO CLA report in response to a Grow Parks motion relative to parking validation expenditures.
Hello. Good afternoon. This is Maria Gutierrez with the CAO office and Lynn Ozawa, CLA. In response to motion Gruhl-Smith, we issued a joint report regarding whether or not we should discontinue the use of parking validations across departments. The question was raised regarding funding for parking validations. We found that approximately $750,000 was spent on parking validations last year through the months of May. Of this amount, approximately $197,000 was a general fund expense, and approximately $552,000 was a special fund expense, mainly from the Special Parking Revenue Fund and the Building Permit Enterprise Trust Fund. We also found that a majority of the departments were using parking validations as an incentive for volunteers or commissioners or city staff when they have field offices. What we're recommending is that general managers be instructed to ensure that parking validations are issued primarily to volunteers providing city services, including commissioners, or when there is a documentable business reason for doing so. We'd also instruct general managers to ensure that city employees carpool or use public transportations to attend off-site meetings and trainings whenever possible.
And I had some concerns. I think the total that we spend on parking validations is $750,000, correct?
Yes.
And my concerns were on a couple of them. One, they're on the library, asking on the transfer, and the library trust fund for these, is that, I thought it was 100 and some thousand.
It's 205.
It's 205,000? And that comes from special parking revenue fund? And has that been a consistent amount over the years?
Yes.
Ye-
Yes, it is. The amount has been
Every
pretty
stayed
consistent.
stable over the years?
In the years that we looked at, last year, this year, so.
How long
right
have we been
now-
doing it?
We looked at it, we looked last year, and
Do we know how long we've been doing the library trust fund, other special parking revenue?
well,
fund?
this was in response to a policy that was enacted just a couple years ago. I think it was by Council Member Rita Walters at the time, so it has been a couple years ago,
It'd
to
be about-
encourage
it'd be
the
about
library.
Eight.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was to encourage the library, the members of the public to have easy access to the central public library.
Do we know how many of those are public versus employees?
No, we could get that information for you. We'll
Okay.
follow up.
I think, and Mr. Alacona, we're not a whole committee today. It's going to be a communication from the chair, but my concern is that we should limit as much those, and this library, Downtown Central Library, I think, is a little bit different, because I want to make sure that, I know the reason why they did that was the access to that library and concern over cost, and when they rebuilt it and so forth. But the other one that I was concerned about was, as well, was the $267,523. I know since the last time we spoke that you have indicated to my staff that the Building Permit Enterprise Fund, that part of what they're charged as their permit fee includes validation, parking validation?
Yes, I believe that's true.
So if I'm a developer and I come in and I come in one time, I spend so much on my parking validation. If I'm a developer that comes in 100 times, am I spending the same amount?
Well, I think we have building and safety here.
Okay.
Perhaps they can answer that question.
Okay. Hello.
Good afternoon, council members. Dave Lara with the Department of Building and Safety. First of all, if I may address just on the question of the figure, we have over 500,000 customers actually come through our doors at Building and Safety. It's quite a number of them. Part of the intent behind the parking validation is that we actually want to encourage people to come in, because as you know, throughout the city, some people may not feel that permits are necessary to do some work, and so we want to encourage people coming in so we can give them that information one-on-one, and it's kind of an incentive for them to come in. We've actually had this practice since 2000. All of this money, of course, is paid through the permit fees that actually are generated through the public that as people come in. The locations where we primarily offer it is at Figueroa Plaza here downtown, as well as the Van Nuys Marvin Browdy Center. And as you're probably fully aware, is that, parking is kind of difficult as it is in both those locations. So this allows people that, need some brief information, quick and dirty, come in, come out, and it gives them that incentive to do so.
So everyone who comes in gets a parking validation?
Those that request it. A lot of times, some people don't request it.
Do they know to request it?
Yes, they are. We have signs up throughout the department that if they wish to request for a $20 value, or 20-minute validation, they can get that. But again, our expenses on that are we keep that at a minimal. As far as the questions on staffing, or whether or not our staff actually utilizes that, we encourage our staff to use public transportation. We encourage them also.
Do we validate staffing at all? Staff members who come in?
There are very, very rare occasions, special circumstances, for example, where if an individual may have, most of our, for example, our inspection and managerial staff have special parking placard. And so if they forget that and they happen to come to a meeting, we may offer them that, just kind of as to to help expedite them coming to the meeting and parking. But other than that, there's very special circumstances. We do keep logs of who we give the validation to. I know in our front office where our general manager is, we keep a log of that. Our staff is required to keep a log of how many parking
'Cause I understand.
validations
I mean,
offered.
2000, our finances were a little different than today, and you look at 267,000 is a lot of money. What we were told by, I don't know if it was CAO or CLA or from your office, is that it was all generated by permit fees, but that doesn't sound correct as you just described it, as some are employees, some are other people who come in and ask questions but aren't, and not necessarily are part of are actually getting a permit.
No, it's all out of the enterprise fund, which is generated by permit fees. All of the monies under the ordinance that go in through the enterprise fund is permit fees, administrative fees that people pay for. Somebody may come in and file.
Right, but someone was suggesting to me that if I said, you had to charge everybody, that then it would be double dipping necessarily, that we would be charging them twice. But if I'm coming in and getting, asking questions about a permit fee, my money's not going into that special permit.
Well, eventually,
enterprise fund,
we
building permit.
figure that eventually it would, because most of these people that come in, they either want to build a room addition or something like that, in which case they will be obtaining permit fees for that type of work. So but again, to answer your question, all of the fees or the parking is paid out of the enterprise fund, which is generated by permit fees, which the public pays for.
But if you didn't validate people's parking, where would that money go to?
Well, if we didn't offer validation, obviously that money would go to paying for other integral services within the department that work in conjunction with permit-related type services or inspection-related type services.
Right, so it could be used for inspectors or other kinds of things.
Yes.
It could be. I would like us, particularly on that, and there's also LAPD had 150,000, which I wasn't clear exactly. Let's see, where's that? 125, I'm sorry. Where they're having people park.
This is something we were following up on before this meeting today. This is a figure that we got from LAPD as an expense for the last 3 years. So for the last 3 years, they've been spending about $125,000 a year. We are following up with to get more detail regarding whether this is being generated by members of the public, commissioners, or city staff. So we hope to have that information shortly.
I'm also curious as to where the bulk of that, as well as in building and safety, where those validations are occurring. Because if you're going to the LAPD, can they not park in City Hall East if people arrange for them to park in City Hall East rather than validating their parking in those locations? And similarly, in the into the valley, into Van Nuys and those locations as well. Because if city employees are using it, and I know there was some enforcement occurring around the Van Nuys City Hall because some were using that, instead of necessarily paying for parking, which all of us pay for, employee parking, we're parking on the street around those areas instead of doing that. And I think this fits into the same as we're looking in next year. So I would like to ask if we could look at both, and those that are most expensive, both in the LAPD and for building and safety, get a little bit more data as to exactly where those costs are being incurred, which locations, and who that's going to. And also to look a little bit farther than just the last 2 years on that library fund. If it's gone up, if it's $205,000 last year, the year before, what was it in previous years?
We'll do that.
Well, first of all, do each of the departments have a policy on the use of validation?
I think what we found is that it really varies. They don't really budget for this at the beginning of the year, but as the need arises on an as-needed basis, they'll fund. In some cases, the Department of Aging limits it to the people they service. So it really varies. In some cases, like El Pueblo is providing validations for their volunteers.
No, but I'm asking if they have a written policy on how to use validation, what the purpose of the validations is.
Not that we're aware of.
None of the departments have that?
We're not aware of that. We would have to follow
Would
up.
it- I don't think you have to have a council motion to put a policy in place. Can't the CAO ask all departments to establish a policy?
Certainly, we can look into that.
Well, we can, well.
You can do that.
You can instruct, we'll amend the report that says that we ask you to draft
Yeah,
a.
Secondly, if the validations provided were equivalent to $750,000, if the validations weren't provided, how many people would have come or would have not come? Has there been any analysis on that?
Wouldn't have not used our services?
Yes.
No, we don't have that level of detail.
If in fact, Building and Safety is saying that they use this as an incentive to use services, there has to be an assumption that they wouldn't use the service if they didn't provide this incentive. So the $750,000 is not necessarily revenue that would be generated if we didn't have a validation policy or procedure. Thirdly, with the recommendations that the CAO has made, how much money would be saved from that $750,000?
Well, that's something that we would need to track on a forward basis. I mean, we would, based on last year, potentially, we could be saving less than $750,000 because our policy would permit the use of validations by commissioners and volunteers. So we would estimate that the savings would probably be less than the $750,000 that was incurred last year.
How many commissioners and volunteers do we have? I don't think it's that much.
Well, if I understood the recommendation, it said primarily. So it
Yes.
leaves the door wide open for the department to do exactly what they're doing now. I'm questioning if in fact there's been any analysis as to whether the recommendations that you are making have any impact on the $750,000 or not. Has there been any analysis to that effect?
No, and that's why I asked those questions of those individual departments, and because
Yeah,
I don't believe the recommendations make any changes in our current policy. I mean, make any changes for the departments to act differently than what they're doing now.
I don't assume going in that the departments are using this frivolously. In fact, I believe that the idea of using validations probably emerged for some beneficial purpose. Is it abused or not? I don't know. I can't really tell from the data that's been provided. If we don't know if the department has a policy, I don't know how you measure the abuse. It seems to me that you would have to evaluate the policy first to establish whether or not there is a policy, then whether or not they are in compliance with their policy, and thirdly, whether or not the policy is correct or whether we should change the policy. But I don't see any of that in the report, and I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that wasn't what was requested. You provided exactly what was requested. So I would add those elements to the request because I think we might be judging before having the kind of information necessary to make an appropriate judgment. What I suspect is there probably is a little bit of abuse here and there, but that generally speaking, that people are getting the validations because it's good for the city. Otherwise, it might cost us more money.
Well, I think the reason, because I'm the maker of the motion, it was not the intent that we thought anyone was abusing it, and I want to make that clear. The intent was, it is 2008. We have a $215 million deficit. Does it serve the same purpose as it did before? Is it necessary to do those validations?
Well, I think
Are there changes that we can make? And it does, in the motion, actually direct appropriate departments and commissions to cease further expenditures.
But
I think the information that we have, as I indicated as well, we need more information to make that decision.
Without going into a long thing, Mr. Lara was essentially saying that they incentivize people to come in because if they don't come in, it'll cost us a lot more in the long run. So paying for a parking validation might be more cost-effective than not paying for it if the people continue to be in violation.
I would disagree that, though, if someone is going to do a remodel on their house, only if their disincentive is they're not going to pay the parking, I think then there's a bigger problem. They're not coming down here just because they're going to have to pay for parking. They're not coming to Van Nuys because they're going to have to pay for parking. There are other reasons. It may not be that is the key, but I don't know, David, if you were suggesting that people won't come in at all if they have to pay for parking.
No, if I may, council members, just...
Well, I'll give you another example. I think some commissioners might not show up to meetings if they have to pay
We're not suggesting, though, that commissioners not get, those are a different group of people who are coming. I'm not suggesting commissioners not get reimbursed. What I'm suggesting in this motion and asking for further information is $750,000 as it's currently being spent appropriately? Are there people who should get validated? Are there other groups that in a tough time we are not going to be able to validate anymore because we're going to be choosing between validating or keeping parks open or doing these other things? We have to make those difficult choices, but we don't have enough information to make those choices.
Exactly. We don't, that's my point. We don't have enough information to say yay or nay. We can't say that we would generate savings or whether we would lose money. And that's the kind of analysis that I would need to make before making a judgment.
If I may just clarify one point that I said, council members, when we want to encourage people to come in, understand that there's a lot of information over the internet now. We do have a real fantastic website where you can gather all kinds of information. However, as you know, some folks maybe don't have a computer or, maybe aren't that sophisticated as far as understanding codes and things like that. So, a lot of people we'd like to encourage to come down because, as engineers and inspectors, we're very visual, and if we look at a plan, we can understand the question better than answering it over the phone. And so that type of incentive for those folks makes it easier for them to understand what the codes are. So that way it does encourage them to come in with a better product, a better plan. We give them that information, and at the same time, they're able to get at least, a break on some of their validation.
But maybe it's, again, I think we want to look at, maybe it's not, I don't know how much it goes to Fig Plaza, how much it costs to go there, but, maybe we don't pay the whole amount, it is half amount, but I just think that to not look at it is problematic to me. And I think that we also want to encourage people to take public transportation where they can. I mean, there's a reason we have our city buildings next to the Orange Line out in the San Fernando Valley and the subway here and the dash buses that specifically go to those city buildings for a reason in those areas. So my recommendation, and we do have one speaker card that has just been, submitted on item number 2, which is, but maybe, I'm just going to say what Mr. Box first, wherever you are, Stephen. Just going to say what I'd like them to do, and then you can comment on that as well, which is to approve the CAO and CLA. There's nothing wrong with them, but I do believe that we want them to come back. We want you to come back with the questions that have been raised today in the next 30 days. This will go to Budget and Finance as well for further discussion. Stephen, would you like to, Stephen Box, just put in a card on this item? Come on up. There's a seat for you.
Stephen Box, Bike Riders Collective. Couldn't resist. I heard this conversation of parking for automobiles, I presume. One approach is to take a look at how much you spend validating for automobile parking. Another approach would be to establish a policy with the City of Los Angeles, all good things start at home, so that all City of Los Angeles activities, events, meetings take place in facilities that are accessible to those on foot, to those that ride a bike, to those that take mass transit, and if there's any room left over for those that bring a car. But we seem to have this presumption that's completely reversed, that if there's a meeting, it must have parking for automobiles first and foremost. Heaven forbid you should have an event that doesn't have sufficient parking for automobiles, and you'd hear a significant protest. The Metro had an event out in Chatsworth that was Metro inaccessible, where they invited the public to come and listen to their new plan for the Canoga extension. It was kind of curious. The local bus stopped running at 6 o'clock, and the meeting was at 6:30. But we do the same thing in Griffith Park at the ranger station. We have meetings. There's no Metro accessibility. You'd actually have to walk on a dark road if you were going to walk to it. Something so simple as having bike racks at our facilities would go a long way to telling people they're welcome And the other thing is that when we notify the public of events, it would be super if we could notify them of the 3 mechanisms for getting there: on foot, by bike or where the bike parking is, and of course, mass transit accessibility. But what you'll notice on most notifications is it says big and bold at the bottom where the automobile parking is. So first and foremost, we're reinforcing bad behavior. And I appreciate you're looking at the validation. I think we could go the whole 9 yards, though, and actually flip the whole bias.
Parking.
Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Great. So I think we'll move it forward to Budget and Finance for you to be able to answer those questions, and then it'll be considered in Budget and Finance. Great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, item number 3 is the DOT report in response to a Reyes-Gruel motion relative to the Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Good afternoon, Michelle Mallory, Senior Bicycle Coordinator with the Department of Transportation.
Helen Vivas, Department of City Planning. We're just here to answer questions.
Jordan Turner, City Planning, also here to answer questions.
We're here to report back on the motion submitted to reorganize the city's Bicycle Advisory Committee and look at ways to make the committee more efficient. At this point, DOT concurs with most of the recommendations in the motion submitted by Council Member Reyes. We recommend, with a few slight revisions, we recommend that the Department of Transportation and Recreation and Parks jointly staff the committee rather than Department of Transportation and Planning. We've talked to Planning about this. Their ongoing input to bicycling matters in the city generally have to do with planning matters. While we're revising the new bicycle plan or community plans, their input and their attendance at the committee is certainly important. But the ongoing operation, ownership, and maintenance of bicycle facilities and programs generally falls to the Department of Transportation and Recreation. We recommend that the committee continue to be comprised of 19 members without alternates. Currently, the committee is 15 members with 4 appointed by the mayor's office. It's already a large, wieldy committee. Adding 19 alternates might confuse the issue. We might have alternates and committee members with differing opinions on varying items, and we think it'd be difficult to work with. We had an item in here that recommended the city clerk work with the posting of minutes. Our general manager has worked with the city clerk, and we are at this point recommending unfreezing a position in DOT to take on the administrative duties within DOT rather than city clerk assistants. We're also looking at the establishment of a new policy for the selection of the BAC chair. In the past, the mayor has appointed the BAC chair, and it's been the mayor's purview to do so. Our general manager has interfaced with the mayor, and he currently doesn't have an interest in continuing to appoint the chairman. The department has no problem with the committee selecting their own chairman, and also recommends that the committee select a vice chairman at the same time to preside over meetings when the chairman is not available. We do recommend that chairman serve 2 years rather than a 1 year, mainly because the BAC meets in a full committee 6 times a year. We think it'd be a really short option to have a 1 year term of service with only 6 meetings. We think it'd be better for continuity for the committee chair to serve 2 years. The motion also requested that Department of Public Works assign staff. We think that's good because Department of Public Works is responsible for a lot of the civil design on our bicycle paths as well as maintenance of bicycle facilities throughout on the roadway system. Things like grates, sweeping of bike lanes, pothole repair in bike lanes, whatnot. So we'd welcome Department of Public Works to be available for the committee. We also agree and support the assignment of a city attorney and or clerk staff to attend the meetings on a semi-regular basis to address concerns about issues with Brown Act or ongoing operation of the committee. We also have one other recommendation.
Brown Act Committee.
I'm sorry?
Is it yes, it is. Thank you. I just want to make sure if it's under the Brown Act.
It's appointed by members of the legislative body, so it is a Brown Act committee, a large Brown Act committee.
Thank you. The department has one other recommendation. As you may know, the chairman of the committee since inception in 1972 has been Alex Baum. He's been appointed by 4 mayors over a number of years. We recommend that City Council recognize his service over the years and appoint him as an emeritus member of the committee on an ongoing basis as he's willing to serve. And that's essentially it from us.
Okay, so if I can understand, the planning department, Plum heard the item on May 13th and referred it over to us, and then the BAC members made additional recommendations. So I guess before us is a report from Rita. Are the recommendations that you have indicated today, are they different than what's in this report?
On page 3 of my report, at the BAC's regular meeting of June 3rd, 2008, the Bicycle Advisory Committee actually went through each of the items and made their own recommendations. Some of them are very similar. Some of them have a little bit of tweaking. For instance, DOT is recommending that the committee be staffed by DOT Rec and Parks and Rec and Parks. The committee would like to have city planning at the table as well. So all 3 agencies jointly staffing rather than just the 2 that we recommend with Rec and Parks coming in. So that's a typical example. But the recommendations are on page 3, continue on page 4, with the changes in the BAC's recommendation in italics in the report. So everything else is the same except for the italicized sections.
Except for the italicized, okay. And how many times do they meet a year?
They meet in full committee 6 times a year. The first Tuesday of every even month. They also have 3 subcommittees that meet in the off months. So in the odd months, they're meeting in subcommittees. Items from the subcommittees refer up to the full BAC.
So how many meetings a year? And the subcommittee meetings, I assume, are also Brown Act required? Shelley? Subcommittees are also Brown Act?
They are if they're standing subcommittees.
And they are. So 6 regular meetings, and then 6 meetings of the 3 committees, so 18 plus 12. And some of the members serve on multiple subcommittees.
Okay. And so it's my understanding that the CAO is going to recommend a position that would be within your department, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. That would be staff, in essence, to the Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Correct.
And you're recommending it just be Rec and Parks and DOT with Department of City Planning where appropriate?
Correct.
Okay, on the 2 staffing, okay. And we'll clearly add the Alex Baum recommendations. I've known him for many years as an emeritus. You're saying, now, I know in the past there hasn't necessarily always been appointees made by my colleagues. I know in the past that there are vacancies. Not all my colleagues have appointed people.
Currently, we have only 1 vacancy in Council District 6. We understand that they have either made an appointment or are ready to make an appointment, and they're trying to notify us at this
Because
point.
I know a few years ago we did I think we sent a letter to everybody asking them, if my memory serves me correctly.
And we do that semi-regularly.
To remind them to have an appointee to the Bicycle Advisory Committee. Okay. You have any questions for Alcon? Then we do have some public speakers.
Just one. I noticed we wanted to add a liaison from the Department of Recreation and Parks. We often think of bicycle riding as a recreational activity, but I would argue that the vast majority of people, adults anyway, on bicycles are using them for work. And so do we have any organization that advocates workforce bicycling? Or do we have representatives on the Bicycle Advisory Council that look at it from that perspective?
I would say that most of the members, although a lot of the members come from different perspectives with relative to bicycling, we certainly have some from the racing community, and we have some from the purely recreational community. I would guess that at least 75% of the membership is really looking at bicycling as a transportation alternative. Even the gentleman who is a former Olympian on his bike has been really involved with the human-powered transportation movement for 20, 30 years. So it's really an emphasis on moving transportation forward, and depending on what council office we're dealing with, there certainly is an emphasis on providing facilities for low-income users. Did I answer your question?
I don't think so. I'm talking specifically about workforce bicyclists, people that use their bike to get to work.
We have a number of support mechanisms built in, not necessarily through the Bicycle Advisory Committee. Transportation Management Associations, the city's personnel department, Metro, all support bicycling to work in a number of avenues. Either they are promoting bicycling by giving incentives to bicyclists. For instance, as a city employee, you can get a bus pass. You can also be reimbursed for bicycle use. So there are a number of agencies, but not necessarily supported specifically by the Bicycle Advisory Committee, which is advisory to the city.
The Bicycle Advisory Committee needs to have the perspective of the workforce who needs to get to work because they can't afford the gas. And it doesn't appear to me that there's anybody speaking out for the working people.
I actually think we have a number of members that speak out for the working people, and they're continuing to move that forward. Specifically, the Council District 1 appointee, the Council District 13 appointee are very cognizant of workforce issues for low-income people and the need to provide facilities for them.
Is there any kind of report on that?
Metro actually did a report a few years ago that really looked at low-income folks, where they were riding to and from. We can provide you with a copy of that.
Could I see that report,
Sure.
please? Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things I think as we're providing staff and so forth is really to ask the Bicycle Advisory Committee to come back with a work plan and goals and objectives for the next year as well. And so that will be added too. But I'd like to, there are 4 members of the public who would like to speak. So if you all wouldn't mind giving them your seats for a moment. Stephen Box, Arnold Sachs, Damian Newton, and Mark Peterson.
Good afternoon. Stephen Box, I'm on the California State Parks Common Ground Committee. I'm also on the Caltrans District 7 Bicycle Advisory Committee, and I'm the founder of the Bike Riders Collective. And I'm here in support of the motion, unmodified. Quite simply, in 2007, the Bicycle Advisory Committee struggled with quorum. It met 6 times. It did 10 things officially. It approved the minutes 6 times, and it agreed to write 4 letters that were never written. So to answer your question, the answer is no, 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 and no. In essence, it has, based on results, often harsh but always fair, done little, if anything, to represent the people of LA. I would love for it to be an advisory body that represents the public, but we essentially have to fight with the department to get at our committee. So all this argument over who gets to staff it, you got to ask, why are people scrambling for more work? We would love to have the planning department involved. Transportation is a function of planning and land use decisions. The bicycle master plan is part of the transportation element of the general plan. It's a planning document. So we've been quibbling over who's in charge or which department is going to run our advisory committee for us, and at the same time we're elbowing in saying we'd like access. To be struggling 2 years after we brought up the Brown Act to get access to these meetings is a travesty. The committees are still inaccessible according to the Brown Act. They're a violation. To attend, you have to violate the Brown Act. So you see, we're still struggling. We'd love to have the city attorney involved. We'd love to have planning involved. But essentially, we'd love to have alternates so we didn't struggle to have a quorum. The public shows up. It's the committee that doesn't show. So at the last meeting, staff and committee were a half an hour late. That's our time, and we show up on a regular basis. I have here letters in support from Joe Young of the Sierra Club, saying the Sierra Club supports the attached motion. Lynn Brown of the National Trail Coordinator for Equestrian Trails supports this motion. Mary Benson of Los Angeles Trails officially endorses this motion. Bernadette Soder supports this motion. Jerry Hahn supports this motion. I'll drop these off with you. Thank you very much for your consideration and support.
I think our intent is to, and particularly Mr. Reyes, who introduced this motion, was to have it a more effective and participatory and public. Thanks, Stephen. Hi.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Damian Newton. I write for Los Angeles Streets blog, but I'm here to represent myself. 3 suggestions. The first would be to definitely keep planning as a part of the main structure of the committee. If Councilman Rosendahl were still here, I know he would have brought this point up, because this may be the first meeting I've been at that he's at where he doesn't talk about transportation and land use planning being married at the hip, and he sometimes puts his hands together, but he's not here, so I did it for him.
Did a very good imitation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, people get us confused all the time. Second, I think it's great that there's been a movement here to do some reforms to the Bike Advisory Committee. The city also has a pedestrian advisory committee that could probably use some help too in the form of staffing. I know people from planning and DOT and Caltrans do go to the committees, but I haven't seen a lot of energy at the two that I've been to as far as addressing things. A lot of it seems to be sharing reports, which is some of the complaints that I've heard about this committee. And the third thing is, in my role writing Streets blog and writing 2 or 3 or 4 stories every day, I got a lot of story idea suggestions from the bike community. And earlier in the year, I was getting story after story forwarded to me from people's personal blogs of them being having some sort of issue with metro buses, whatever the problems were. It seems to have gotten better as the summers went on. I know Metro's put together a task force. But over the past month or two, seems to be that they're having more issues with confusion with rules with the police of some sort. Sometimes someone will get in an argument with a police officer where they're trying to make a left-hand turn in a left-hand turn lane, and the officer says they need to use the crosswalk, but that's not true. And I think it's just because there's so many more people biking right now. So I think definitely mandating an LAPD presence at these meetings too would be a good way to have an official format for people to be able to talk to the police about some of the problems that they're seeing out there now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Mark Peterson. I'm with the Bike Riders Collective as well. I've been attending these meetings for the BAC meetings for almost 2 years now. And I just want to say that I also support this motion as it stands. I think it's critical that we have this committee in place for the cycling public, for the increasing numbers of cycling public, to have access to just to have access to the people that making decisions, and to the people that we need to speak to in order to correct some of these things that Damien was mentioning, that Stephen was mentioning. It's been a chronic problem of not having the minutes and the agendas posted on the website for us to consult before we go to these meetings. It's been a chronic problem of people not showing up for these meetings, and we're finally starting to see a consistent need for better bicycle infrastructure, better understanding of law enforcement and bicycling, and as well as the metro system, integrating bicycling into that. So I would like to say again, I support this motion, and I hope things get better with the BAC. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sachs, did you choose not to speak? Okay. Thank you. Hi.
Holly Walcott with the City Clerk's Office. We just want to request a clarification on recommendations 3 and 7 for my own staff. For the record, that 3 was changed to the DOT staff, and that recommendation number 7 was changed to the city attorney.
In which report? In
Rita Robinson's report, the Department of Transportation.
Instead of it being city clerk, you're saying it's what?
It's DOT staff. On recommendation number 3, direct the DOT staff to post agendas, post and record minutes, and provide administrative support to the BAC. And recommendation number 7, request assignment of city attorney to staff the regular meetings to address Brown Act requirements.
Yeah, I think as staff went over the recommendations, we were going to change number 1 to say after city planning where appropriate, and then item 3 was changed, as Holly said, to unfreeze the DOT position to conduct this work, and then we would also delete the city clerk from item number 7.
Okay. And I guess, and on the city attorney, I mean, I would love to have them at those meetings, but my only challenge is we're not having city attorney meetings. City attorneys go to our planning committee meetings, which we're very concerned about.
I can't speak for the staffing and deployment issues of our office, but obviously the council can certainly request of the city attorney that he make such an assignment.
I think it would be, helpful initially when we're reinvigorating it, to have city attorney present. I'm not sure, we don't have at our neighborhood council meetings, we do not have city attorneys present. So just being real on that and supporting it, that I think we would ask the city attorney to help and advise and attend where appropriate, but then I'm not sure we can require a city attorney to be at every single meeting, because we're not able to do that now with our neighborhood councils that meet on a monthly basis as well.
Did you want to keep the request as it is right now, or you want to amend that to the request of city attorney to, at least as you said at the beginning, help the committee?
To attend as appropriate, and as requested, I think would be attend as appropriate and as requested, as well as with planning. I do have a question, though. I don't know if, is anyone from Ed Reyes' office here? Oh, sorry, I didn't see you in the back. because there were a couple of things that were in the report that were different than the motion, and I want to take direction from Ed.
Thank you very much.
And wanted to see where you are coming from.
Okay, Jill Soriel with Councilmember Reyes' office. I appreciate, I did have a chance to speak with both your staff and DOT staff. Our goal with the motion was really to kind of empower both the committee and the city staff to be able to be as effective as possible. I hope to see it as kind of a work in progress. We see how things go, we come back. If it's not working, we make some changes. So we would support it moving forward, and be happy to come back and relook at it if necessary.
And I think the two that I noted in the motion that were a little bit different was the alternate and also the planning department.
Yeah.
And I think that we will take this as an evolving process, and if we see one, that their attendance is not improving, and there is a need for alternates, and we, will look to the department and to the advisory committee to recommend that, as well as also if planning is not, not that they won't be responsive, but if they're not coming when requested and so forth, or LAPD, that then we would revisit that. So maybe we ask for a 6-month status report.
That would be helpful. And just our intent with the alternates, I know it's a large committee, so we didn't want to make it even more unwieldy by having double the number of participants. It was more to make sure that there was a quorum and that business could be conducted. So if there's other ways to achieve that, if they are able to make quorum, that would be fine.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Halpin, your question?
Do they get parking validate? No, I'm just.
They ride their bikes.
See, now that's right.
No, they ride bikes. Actually, I wanted to know what was the purpose of having the city attorney at the meeting?
For Brown Act, it's suggested in here for Brown Act compliance.
But would they have to go to every meeting? I mean, can't they just have a training session like?
Well, that's what the report said, and so that's why I suggested in that item that it says on item 7, request the assignment of a city attorney and a DOT, it'd be city clerk, was before staff to the regular meetings of the committee to address Brown Act requirements. So that was suggesting they come to every meeting, and I said that wasn't appropriate.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to look is that they provide training early on and be, where appropriate, asked to attend, but that we're not, our neighborhood council meetings, I don't think any.
There should be somebody assigned the responsibility of the bicycle advisory committee, but I don't know that they need to go to every meeting.
Well, in particular, there's a difference between having a regularly assigned city attorney, whether they attend every meeting or not, that can field issues. And then there's the issue, if it's really focused on Brown Act compliance or Brown Act knowledge, where members of my office would certainly be happy to go to the first meeting after the chair is elected, the chair and the vice chair is elected, and give a little workshop in what the protocols should be thereafter, and especially if the reason for the request is a concern that there is non-compliance with the Brown Act provisions.
So I think if we change it, it says as appropriate, then that will fix that. Okay. So we will amend the report here and ask for 6-month report back as well. Okay. Thank you all for your input on that. Next item?
Item number 4 is a Gil Garcetti motion relative to the feasibility of creating a bicycle sharing program in the city of Los Angeles.
Michelle Mallory again with LADOT. We've reviewed the motion, have a couple concerns. I'm not sure where you're going to direct us to go on this. A few things. Paris and Europe are very different from what's going on in Los Angeles. The region in Paris is about 12 million people. We're about 8 million people. They are reported to have access and availability of only 120,000 bicycles for 12 million people. And here we anecdotally estimate that 4 million people probably have 60 to 70% access to bicycles. We also have concerns.
I was in Denver.
I'm sorry?
I said I was in Denver. They had a bicycle sharing program. So that's a local, and not as large as the city of LA.
That's certainly right, and they certainly have a much more built-out network, which was
You're saying that there's more bikes here.
Yeah, and
there are a lot more bikes here. Yeah. We don't quite have a network, as you're all aware. One of the concerns about Los Angeles and a lot of the ongoing issues we hear is the need to put in more facilities. We don't quite have as many facilities as Paris. They have a real mishmash of applications of how they deal with bicycling and how they direct people to bicycle on the roadways. But a roadway use here by motorists and bicyclists is very different. So we're concerned about that and liability to the city. The Paris program is primarily implemented by a vendor who trades out ad space, 1,600 billboards in exchange for what is currently about 16,000 bicycles. They hope to have 20,000 bicycles by the end of the year. So that's essentially how their program works. This private vendor comes in and for the exchange for ad space puts in the bicycle programs and serves it. They are reported to have started with 200 employees to implement the program. We now understand they're shooting for 400 employees. They do a number of things like shift bicycles around throughout the day, deal with ongoing maintenance, but they still have the number of concerns that you might have with a large-scale program like this.
I know one of the, for example, we now have a car share program that was going to be larger, but focused now on the 2 universities as a pilot program.
Mhm.
One of the recommendations had maybe to be going out with a RFI to determine whether or not there's anyone interested who would do that. I mean, I don't think there's any, I don't think we've ever thought that DOT would operate it. I think the idea is if there's a market, and we can encourage it and potentially provide space on areas where, with it in working cooperative with the MTA, that we want to do everything we can to incentivize it. I think one of the recommendations we had talked about was going out to an RFI and see if there was anyone responding.
That's certainly something we'd be happy to work with your office on.
Okay. Do you have any questions before we have the speakers? Okay. If we could ask Mark Peterson, Stephen Box, Arisha Smolarski, Dorothy Lay, and Damian Newton. And I think there's actually 5 seats if you all want to come up. We'll let the ladies go first. Mark, you can have a seat there if you'd like. Dorothy?
Okay. Yes, I'll go. Okay. Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Arisha Smolarski. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, excuse me.
Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Arisha Smolarski. I'm with the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition, and we are very pleased that the council is thinking of ways to make LA more bike-friendly, but we definitely need to think about some of the vital steps that need to happen before we install a system that creates a lot of, that puts a lot of new cyclists as well as people visiting the city on our roadways. And what I would like to see incorporated in this motion is some additional elements that DOT or that you also make a priority to actually implement bike lanes, bike parking, and sharrows to make it actually safe for those cyclists that are going to be possibly using the bike sharing as well as those cyclists that are going to be on the road. Right now, Los Angeles is in dire need of some major bike infrastructure, and we need to see that the priority is actually in making LA more accommodating for that. I actually have been to Paris throughout their whole becoming a bike city, and in the past 5 years, what they did before they actually implemented the bike sharing program was that they made their city bike friendly by putting in all these bike lanes, sharrows, bike signage, and all that, and then at the end, boom, you had this bike sharing. So I like the idea, and I think that we can work towards getting to that point, but let's focus on the first steps and make that part of your motion. Make that part of like an implementation necessary that DOT needs to incorporate within their transportation plan to make it much more friendly for a cyclist to use the streets of LA as a mode of getting around.
Thank you.
Dorothy Lay from Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition also, and the only thing I would have to add was that if you're going to pursue, I mean, obviously bike facilities are the most important thing you need to pursue, but if you're going to pursue the bike share, also remember to develop it in a small area first, I think, because especially with a transit hub or a existing bike facility, because Los Angeles is so big, and you gotta make sure that it works, and we don't want to implement a program that doesn't work. And we actually have been independently exploring bike share for a while, so we would be glad to communicate with you in the future, and wished you could have communicated with us before about it, because we had some things that we've learned. And
I think that's why we have this motion, is for you to all participate too. So
right, thank you. And hopefully, in the near future, LA will be one of the nation's top destinations for bikes, and we think that can happen, and together we can make it happen.
Thank you.
Hi, Mark Peterson, Bike Riders Collective. The overwhelming sentiment that I get from, admittedly an unscientific poll, but most of my friends, most of the people I know that don't currently bicycle, they're terrified to bicycle on the streets. I think this has to be the first priority before you think about getting a bike sharing program. I think a bike sharing program could be a good thing, but overwhelmingly to me, what needs to happen first is Los Angeles needs to be more friendly to bicycles, at least even in a more constrained area if necessary. But it has to people have to start to understand that it can be safe to bicycle for transportation. Until that happens, a bike sharing program shouldn't be something that should be the first priority.
Hi, Damian Newton. I want to echo what I've heard from the three people that spoke before me. I put this on Streets blog this morning with some links and some ideas. And the response I got from people, admittedly, it was 3.5 hours ago when I left home, so it might have changed a lot in that time, but the response in the comment section was, wow, it's great that people are really thinking about ways to make LA more bike-friendly, but maybe this isn't the best way right now. The concerns about infrastructure, the appearance, or the belief that it's not safe to bike on any city street with people that already don't. It's not, one person said, it's not the availability of bikes, it's the fear that something bad's going to happen once you're on them. That being said, there's a lot of interesting things that are being done with bike sharing programs around the world. What you mentioned in Denver, that was actually a program that only existed that week. All those bikes went to Minneapolis a week later. Bikes Belong put that together. 1,000 bikes, 16 stops. It was a tremendous success in both cities. It might be something that the city might want to look into, perhaps bike share for special events. We certainly have plenty of events in Los Angeles that bring in a lot of people for a short period of time and out, and it might make sense to have bike sharing available because a lot of people that aren't from LA bike all the time, and they're not going to come here with a predisposition that it's a big scary place to be on a bike. And the more people that are on bikes, generally the safer you are. The thing you can do to make a city safe, the first thing that you can do to make a city safe is to get more people on bikes. So it might be those types of things that you also want to look into in the study, not necessarily focus on a Velib or a DC bike share style system, but focus on special events and focus on maybe micro bike share programs. Maybe it would make sense to have one in, just the greater Hollywood area or the West LA area around Santa Monica. I don't know, thinking out, off the top of my head. So there's a lot of different ways this can go, and I don't want people to be trapped in just the Velib mindset.
Good points, all of them. My name's Stephen Box of the Bike Riders Collective, and I just have 3 comments. The first one is back to parking, but if we're going to invest money in bicycles, and by the way, we already have a contract with CVS Deco, we had the option to do the bike loan program. We took bus benches instead, and the double-sided kiosks. Lance Oishi at Street Services administers the contract. It's the same company that did it, for example, in Leon, Spain, and other places. So this is not new, and we already have a relationship with the company if we were interested. But I would suggest that something that might be of greater interest would just be to put some bike racks up. So the simple infrastructure, I'm not the big fan of the big bikeways to wherever, but I am a big fan of the little things such as bike racks. For example, the Bicycle Advisory Committee doesn't have bike racks at the place they have their meetings at, Parker Center. So the Bicycle Master Plan workshops were held at 4 city facilities that didn't have bike racks. So we have a long way to go on something so simple. To your point about workforce development and bicycles, we could take a little bit of money, less than it would take to put a bunch of rental bikes out there, for example, and actually get some sponsors to actually give bikes to those that are transit challenged, if you will, and to provide people with another mechanism and include some training, if you will, because I watch people riding the wrong way late at night with no blinkies, and I grimace. But the fact of the matter is that it's not just a workforce development issue with regards to economics, but with regards to education for safe cycling. And the other thing is that to a regional perspective, the Woodland Hills Warner Center neighborhood is undergoing the Warner Center specific plan, and they're examining alternative forms of transportation in that very specific region. So to pick something that's actually complemented and perhaps even supported by those that are developing the property would be a great opportunity. The W Hotel, for example. We already have bike shares, by the way. Metropolis does it for the studios. John's by USC does it for the students. And there's a hotel in West Hollywood that actually has bicycles for tourists. So you see, we could put it as a condition. We're always asking for, people are always asking for variances, and they offer up some sort of payoff. And if bike loans were them, yay bikes. Thank you.
Thank you, and I just want to acknowledge all of your comments. I think we're trying chicken and egg a little bit of, it is going to take us a while to be as safe as we'd like to be in the city, but we'd like to begin to engage people in that. And so maybe it will be pilot areas that we look at. It really was, let's not wait years until we look at a bike sharing program. Let's do them parallel in some ways where we can do both the safety aspect in a certain area and at the same time have them available. So that was our real interest in doing that. And what the RFI will do, and we'll talk to the department about if we want to look at pilot areas, would welcome your kind of opinion before we go down that path. Thank you.
So the recommendation is to direct DOT to issue an RFI and report back?
And I think before they issue, maybe even before they issue the RFI, to have some discussions with some of the people that were here today, and to look at where there might be pilot areas, where we might focus, and look at then have the RFI maybe even come back to us. Well, I definitely have the Bike Advisory Committee review that and the county.
Okay. That brings us to item 5, which is a Perry Gruel motion relative to requesting Caltrans to present information on the condition of the freeway system in the city of Los Angeles.
Thank you all very much. Greg? I know we have staff here, but I'd like to, please have a seat. Greg, if you'd like to, since this was your boss's motion, say anything you'd like to add to that.
Thank you, Council Member. Good afternoon, Council Members. I'm here on your final item, which is a freeway motion introduced by Councilwoman Perry relative to Caltrans District 7 freeways within the city of Los Angeles. The freeway system in the city of Los Angeles, which is District 7, includes also all of Los Angeles County and Ventura County in a system within the state of some 12 districts. Councilwoman is concerned that we have a series of deteriorating freeways. We have bridges that don't really connect very well to roadways, so if you're going down the road, you come to a bridge, you have a different elevation, you come off the bridge, you have another elevation. She's concerned about landscaping, particularly in areas that are roadways below grade. The passes, Cahuenga, San Diego Freeway Pass, through the Sepulveda Pass, sorry. The I-10 as it goes through the West Adams District. Huge amounts of landscaping have simply deteriorated to the point where it looks like you could end up with landslides. So it's not only a visual problem, but it's also a problem of safety. We have basically, in some respects, nearly abandoned the freeway system. And it's becoming quite apparent that if we don't do something to stopgap where we are not, we're going to be much worse off than we are. We also have things like incomplete signage. As you approach the 101, as you come downtown through the 110, there is no sign that indicates you can go east on the 101, actually into the Civic Center. You come to that split and you have 101 to Hollywood, and there's no 101 east. So basically the rest of downtown is indicated as 2 I-5 or 2 I-10. It's very confusing when you're trying to give directions for the Civic Center. So what we have is basically a system built many years ago that functions, but barely. And it's deteriorating to the point visually and safety-wise that the councilwoman is concerned we need to figure out how to address where we're not going with this.
Thank you very much. Does the department want to respond before we go to Councilman?
Actually, I'm just here to introduce our colleagues at the state DOT. Cal DOT came here today to get some clarification on the instructions of the motion and to receive instructions from your committee. Let them introduce themselves.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Gatsuno Koroki. I'm the roadway program advisor in the district. I work in the maintenance division.
My name is Hector Obeso. I'm the maintenance engineering manager for Caltrans in the LA office.
I think you've heard from Mr. Fisher from Ms. Perry's office, and I think we all have in our own districts some examples of not the kind of maintenance we'd like to see, and some of that, and where we can even be helpful in some of that direction. So the motion actually you kind of asks about an update on the freeway system, where we are. Clearly we have a graffiti problem, particularly on the 101, which I travel on fairly frequently, and I know there's been some update in trying to plant vines and other things to really address that. But if you'd like to just make a presentation as well.
Well, briefly, we have a great shortfall in the funding programs for maintenance. It's funded by the SHOP, a State Highway Operations Prevention Program, and that's funds collected through the gas tax, and it gets filtered to the state capital, and then it gets filtered back to the districts. The funding available has decreased significantly over the past several years, and it's definitely not available for us to maintain it to the level that we like to. So we understand that there is a significant problem maintaining our highways here in LA, but it's very, very challenging. So we do the best we can with the staff we have and the money we have to do projects.
How do you prioritize which ones? Because some, you know, again, anecdotally,
We have
better than others.
we do analysis, continuous analysis of the freeway system as it pertains to bridges and pavement and signage and landscaping, all different aspects of maintenance. And that is collected uniformly statewide, and it's collected and reported back to the districts as far as our condition of our roadways. And from that, we take the worst conditions and we develop projects to address the worst conditions. The issue, of course, is that there's not enough money to address all the issues to the level that we like to.
Well, I basically agree with him. I'm involved in the pavement area and the structural sections of the freeway. One of the issues we have is, like the first speaker said, our freeways are actually getting to their lifespan when they were built. Most of them are old, and they require a lot of money, a lot of funds to rehabilitate these freeways, to bring them to a point where we can do very minimal maintenance to keep them going. So everything boils down to funds. And also, I read the motion, the issue of the condition of the freeway around the downtown area. It has to do with the population that we have to deal with, which is not obtainable in other areas. And I know they're comparing them with probably locations in probably Orange County and some of the other places. Basically, we deal with increased population. These freeways were built in between 60 and 65. Now we have a lot more issues going on and less funds coming in to handle the situations that are coming up. So that is what we have to deal with.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Carolyn Jackson, LADOT. In my discussions with the Assistant District Director for District 7 this afternoon, he indicated that some of the problems that you're hearing about here, like the graffiti and things that we see as that are superficial problems, are really just the tip of the iceberg. And the real problem is the crumbling infrastructure that we're driving on. That pieces of the freeway, he is concerned, are going to start to pop up. And he feels that Southern California is not getting its fair share of monies.
Councilmember, I think Ms. Jackson makes a very good point. There is a real problem with how the money in Caltrans is allocated, not the least of which is the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge, which was originally scheduled at $1.3 billion and is now at $6 billion. Knowing how the state allocates money, and you certainly would, you've got to know that we in the County of Los Angeles must be sending hundreds of millions of dollars up there to fund that, as well as it's acknowledged in a website on the Bay Bridge situation. They are redoing all of their bridges. They are looking at the Golden Gate. They are looking at the Carquinez Straits Bridge, the San Rafael Bridge, the Hayward Bridge. We cannot afford down here to continue to send that kind of money up there if we're not ourselves made whole on these issues, because things are not getting better, to say the least.
So is the council member's position that we take a legislative position which asks the state and Caltrans, particularly in legislature, to more accurately, send money down here for these issues, and then it's
Maybe a report back from Caltrans Sacramento to address how we can get these things funded in light of the fact that we continue to send so much money up north and we're not getting our fair share back in the south.
Secession.
What'd you say? Secession.
We need to secede from Northern California.
Councilman, that was tried in the 1860s, and Northern California would not allow Southern California to secede.
I know.
Maybe the timing just wasn't right.
I mean, there was some justification. They wanted to keep control of their water as well. So.
Mm-hmm.
But Well, we all recognize there's a shortage of funds. That's our job. On a daily basis, we're struggling to make ends meet with the services that we provide. What I don't understand is why the wider, wealthier neighborhoods, landscaping and their off-ramps looks so nice compared to the landscaping in my district, in Pacoima, and in other poor areas. There seems to be a discriminatory effect by Caltrans with regard to landscaping the freeway system throughout California. And I just don't get, I mean, everybody's got the same shortage of dollars. Why do our areas look so much worse? I don't get it.
It's not that it's discrimination. What it is, I think, in my opinion, is that there's not enough resources to maintain it to the same level at every place. There's some regions, some areas.
That sounds like discrimination to me.
Well, it's broken down into 5 different districts, and they all have the same staffing level, and they all work to address the issues within those regions. And some regions require a lot more effort to maintain at a certain level, and they get behind. So they have the same level of resourcing and staffing in the regions. It's just that it takes a lot more in the more urban areas.
I'm talking about within the same region. I'm talking about Beverly Hills looks a lot better than Pacoima. And I don't get it.
Another thing we have is we have programs that encourage the community to improve the area by painting out graffiti or adopting a section of landscaping. And if community approaches Caltrans that they're interested, we work with them to identify locations that they can maintain better than what we would do. And we do encourage everybody to take that opportunity. And some have and some have not.
So would you be able to provide to us where those areas where they're subsidizing it or doing that differently? Because I have one, Valley Plaza, Victor, I don't know, that one always, I see, my office is right near there, and it is a heavily traveled area and very not maintained as well. Again, I'll see a little bit of maintaining, and then it'll be a long time before they come back again.
I can provide a
I can tell you where the homeless people are living right now. I mean, right this minute, if you go to Van Nuys and Remick, the off-ramp on Van Nuys on the 5 freeway, there are 4 people who have houses there on the off-ramp. And if you would just maintain it on any kind of regular basis, those people wouldn't be there. But that's an extreme. What I'm talking about is just the poor areas look terrible compared to the wealthy areas in the same region. I mean, compare Woodland Hills to Pacoima. Compare, Studio City to Pacoima, and there's a clear difference, and I think it is discrimination. You by the way, your response was the definition of discrimination. In limited resources, you choose to spend them differently. That's discriminating. You're discriminating between one area and the other. But I'm not talking about, I didn't even say discrimination. What I said was discriminatory effect. But, as a state legislator for 8 years, there was nothing more frustrating than the lack of response from Caltrans on the landscaping on the freeways with regard to any kind of equity whatsoever. It's horrible. It's, I think, the worst, most blatant form of discriminatory effect in the state system, that everybody sees. There's other things that are probably more egregious. I'm not talking about those things, but I'm more concerned about education than I am about off-ramps. But it's so clear to everybody, and it's just so depressing. You drive, you get off on one off-ramp, you're depressed. You get off on another off-ramp, and you feel, wow, this is nice. And it's within a few miles of each other. So what's going on there?
Well, we try to focus mostly on
wealthy white areas. I know. That's exactly my point. I mean,
we try safety number one priority, and to maintain the pavement in its good condition. Unfortunately, with the limited resources, items such as
I'm talking about within category. Forget about everything. I'm talking about within the category of landscaping. You have wealthy white areas with nice landscaping and poor minority areas with crummy landscaping. There's no explanation for that except you don't care. As a department, I'm not accusing you. I mean, you seem like a nice guy, and if you were king, you'd probably straighten it out. But Caltrans is irresponsive on the issue of landscaping. We get more calls about that than potholes in my district, and Lord knows we have potholes. But that's another issue. So
I think what we'd like to see, and again, I represent the Northeast San Fernando Valley too, and have some of those problems there at Victory and all the way up at Roscoe, which is Tony's district, where we share Roscoe Boulevard and some of those off
citywide.
So I think,
I mean,
yeah.
it's citywide. That's why Jan
I think
Perry
if we
wrote
can you can come back with kind of where those areas are, where, how you respond to calls or maintenance, and particularly in the areas that in Ms. Perry's district, which who introduced the motion, and look at legislative action in which asking the CLA to ensure there's a greater attention to that. Okay. Thank you very much. We do have one public speaker card. Mr. Sachs?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thanks for sticking around for a couple hours.
Yes, good afternoon, Arnold Sachs. Very quickly, appreciate you taking this up, but I don't know if you happen to read the LA Times or any of the local newspapers. On Tuesday, the 23rd, Metro put out huge advertisements in support of Measure R. You had a committee meeting here, and there's nobody here from Metro regarding the quality of the highways. And this is proposed rail and rapid transit expansion and proposed highway improvements. Metro, but there's nobody here from Metro. The big dog, even bigger, in my opinion, be that what it may, than any other department. Because it's a third-party situation again. Funding comes in, goes to a third party, and in the wash, socks get lost. And you have a perfect example. It's great that Ms. Perry's looking at transit problems for the freeways, but I'm looking for her or the committee that she chairs, the Expo Committee, to tell me what happened to the $35 million that went to the Mid-City Expo line when there's no Mid-City Expo line at all. Quid pro quo. That's what happens. Money goes in, these accounts get created. Where does the money end up going? Well, it's spread out over the area. LA is a big area. So there is nothing to show for it. It's a third-party situation. It's always a third-party situation. Transportation is famous. They should have a star in Hollywood for transportation and acting as a third party and the third-party situations that they always represent, because all the money goes in, the third party takes it out, and the public's left. Because there's always more funding from the public. There can always be more funding found. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have public comment cards. I'd like to ask Natasha Harrell, Sang-Yun Yang, Barbara Lott Holland, and Arnold Sachs.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, for item number 5, the motion was approved, but there were certain areas that Caltrans was requested to report back on.
It's on the downtown area where they have subsidized areas across the city. Hello. Thank you for your patience. Sorry, it was a little longer today.
Yeah, well, city business. Hello, my name is Barbara Lott Holland, and I am a bus rider in South Central Los Angeles. And I had the opportunity to be a delegate to the World's Conference on World Sustainability in South Africa. And there I saw a movement from people all over the world with regard to global warming. Even the smallest and the poorest countries were concerned and was there to give their complaints and suggestions with regard to global warming. And then I come back to LA, a world city with great economical might, and we can't even get one single bus-only lane to reduce the air pollution in our city. I think that we should stop stalling and hiding behind the environmental clearance process, the election, and the fact that the funds has been delayed from the government. I think it is time that we should look at this directly and face the fact it all comes down at the end of the day to the political will. Do we have the will here in Los Angeles to challenge we have the car capital of the world? Can we challenge the car capital, the people driving cars, to get them out of their cars and to get onto public transportation? Do we, at the end of the day, have the political will to put our money in a process that is effective? We can just look at Bogota, Colombia, Brazil, South Korea. They have bus-only lanes. What is taking LA so long? Why is it that we continue to delay something that has such a dramatic effect in reducing the car pollution? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I look forward to, hopefully you'll be able to be here on October 8th. Because on October 8th,
Yes.
we're going to have the report back from DOT and MTA, where they are in the required EIR, where we are in the process, because we are as interested as you are in making sure we move forward.
By the way, I've been to Brazil, and that's the worst traffic I've ever seen, ever.
Did you see it before they had the lanes?
Last year, it was horrible.
Was it really?
We're in Brazil,
Sao
too.
Paulo.
Curitiba is the place where they implement it.
Is that in Brazil?
Yes. Cortiba's with and the Zev saw that orange line. Sang-Yang, you want to go, or Natasha?
Hi, my name is Natasha Harrell, and I'm on the Clean Air Campaign Action Committee of the BRU. Member of this committee, we have been organizing and waiting for implementation of the Wilshire Bus-Only Lane project. As you know, we've been here many times to let the body know of our support of this project. We visited your offices, met with your staff, and all this time we've been told to wait. Yet, despite the breakthrough of having this project approved by the City Council last year, since then we're back at the same schedule of delays and oh gosh.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Will. Oh gosh. Enactable. Oh, no, skip it. I have had enough, and the members are tired of waiting, of no guarantees and no clear timelines at this rate. Anything can happen as long as the project is not prioritized by the city. We need leadership based on accountability in actions. You must front the we must front the founding and now. I'm not going anywhere, and I will be organizing in the communities. I am a parent leader at Parent Anonymous. I'm also a parent leader of the Parent Council of Synergy Charter Academy. I'm an active member in my church. The bus-only lanes need to happen today. The public cannot wait any longer.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Transportation Committee. My name is Sang-Yang Yang on behalf of the Bus Riders Union. I'm really here today to once again urge this body to really advocate to fund the Wilshire Bus-Only Lane so this project receives no further setbacks. Councilmember Gruhl, when we met with you in March, which we thought was a great meeting, you've made several commitments as chair of this committee to prioritize and advance the project. First, you committed to keep a monthly meeting, if not a frequent update on the progress of the Wilshire BOL project, including the creation of a task force to keep LADOT and all agencies involved accountable. Secondly, you said you were open to looking for alternative funds after sharing your concerns around the potential and likely federal funding delay. To be clear, this body as a whole also made those similar commitments to look for funding and push forward a timely environmental review process, especially Councilmember Rosendahl, who's not here right now. Yet it's been well over 6 months, and we can't just continue blaming the federal government's delays and sit idly, for an obvious outcome, which means that the further funding is delayed, the further this project's going to be put back in the back burner. And at the end of the day, the outcome of this project will lie on this body, and its success or failure will reflect on you all. And that is the reality of leadership. So we really, really, really urge you to, make a harder, full-fledged effort to find funding for this bus-only lane, and it has to come from the city at this point in creative manners as possible. We've seen the city fund, $40-some million, put its own money into the Exposition Light Rail. We've seen other projects get funded in creative manner, and we need that same kind of creativity and as well as prioritization. So please, I urge you again to take this into consideration.
Thank you. And we will hear on October 8th from those departments. As you know, the MTA is the primary funder of this until we moved it ahead in getting some of these federal dollars and to see where they are. It's about political will, which we're there. It also is about money, unfortunately, and the ability to do that, and it's a little bit of both. And, so,
and the longer we wait, the more it's going to cost.
That's right. Exactly. We know that for sure. So, okay. So we look forward to seeing you on October 8th, 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Mr. Sachs.
Good afternoon. Thank you again, Arnold Sachs. First, I'd like to register a complaint. This was an item posted, Board of Taxi Cab Commissioners cancellation notice, posted September 11th. The regular meeting of the Board of Taxi Cab Commissioners scheduled for Thursday, September 18th is canceled. The next meeting will be a special meeting and scheduled for the week of September 22nd at 9 a.m. in room 1070, City Hall, 200 North Spring Street, Los Angeles. Guess what happened at 9 a.m. on the 22nd?
I have no idea. It's not my...
No meeting, no notice, no cancellation, no nothing. We apologize for the inconvenience. They didn't even know in the secretary's office on the 10th floor that there was a meeting. Not only was it canceled or scheduled, it was canceled. That's a catch-22 situation. I don't know if you're familiar with that part of the book, where they canceled the parades without even scheduling them. The status of the marathon, I thought that was supposed to be moved to this commission meeting based on the hearings that they held in City Council where
It will come to this committee.
I thought it had to be done before the end of the month. It didn't.
It was approved as is, and then we would report back on how we would handle the change in the...
I thought that,
It was not contingent upon it happening by last Monday.
I'm sorry?
It was not contingent upon it happening by last Monday. The action...
No, I thought it was that the spokesman for the McCord Group, which, by the way, couldn't pony up $50,000 for the shuttle bus, mentioned that they would wait until the end of the month, and Councilman LeBon's asked for it to be put into this committee.
The full council adopted the change in the date.
Oh, so the date's been changed already?
The date has...
That's that ridiculous.
The date was changed to a Monday, and they're going to report back on the...
President's Day weekend. So the public is going to give up their President's Day weekend on behalf of the, okay.
It was not requested by the marathon. It was requested by the city to change the date.
It was requested by,
It's not requested by the McCords or the organization buying it. It was requested by motion by Mr. Parks, related to...
right, because of the so-called...
Impact on religious organizations.
Yeah, and and the fact that Boston runs its marathon on a holiday too, but the only holiday that's celebrated is in Boston. It's not celebrated anywhere else in the country. So that's kind of
I
ridiculous.
just wanted to clarify your position.
Yeah. They're just not as religious in Boston as they are in L.A.
Can you adjourn the meeting? Adjourn. Okay, hold on.